Hey there, wedding industry insider, guests, and listeners. This is Eddie Babbage, your host of the show, also the founder and CEO of Timeline Genius. I'm back here with another great episode. I have Ashley Smith with me. She is an industry expert who has topped Bride's best planner list for 5 years. She's known for creating magical dreamscapes and exceeding her clients' expectations, and she brings an adventurous spirit into her plans and creations. Ashley, I am thrilled to have you with us here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So, I had a chance to chat with you a little bit in the pre interview. We're going to get into some of the factors that have allowed you to reach the point that you've reached in your career and in our industry. We're also going to talk about how you navigated your way into the luxury market. And we're going to talk a little bit about destination weddings. But before we do all of that, can you please just give our listeners here a little bit of a sense for your background and tell folks like how you got to be where you currently are in the industry?
Yeah, of course. I I didn't have a straight path into getting into this industry. I think that I kind of fell into it about 14 or 15 years ago. I'm based here in San Francisco, and about that time, I was working in the hospitality industry, particularly in hotels. I was working in sales and convention services and kind of overseeing events. I did go to school for event planning. I got a double major, so I was doing international business and hospitality.
Mhm.
I always knew I kind of wanted to do the international thing. Lo and behold, I didn't love doing business or in China or cared about GDP or anything like that. So I kind of found myself, right out of college working in hotels and kind of stayed for a while. In 2008, I think, right around the time that we hit the recession back
Yeah.
then, a friend asked to help with a friend's wedding, and I couldn't be less interested. I was
Wow.
like, I wanted to do
Wow.
social events. I wanted to do big galas or parties or,
Uh-huh.
like other fun, exciting things. And this wedding, kind of came on the radar and they kept asking me to help. And I was like, no, I don't do weddings. I don't know anything about weddings. It's just not something I'm particularly interested in. And the economy crashed. I was laid off from my job and they asked again. They were like, think about this wedding. And they kind of came back like three more times. And then they finally were like, the wedding is in Spain. It's outside of Madrid. We need help. Like,
Wow.
we'll fly you to Madrid. Like, will you come? And
Wow.
I was like, oh, well, you should have said that first. Well, that was exciting. So then I ended up, yeah, they should have led with that. I ended up getting to know the bride very well, and I did go out to Madrid and did a really fun site visit with her, and then ended up producing her wedding it ended up being in July of 2010, and it was
Okay.
really a 180 for me. It was really a fun experience where it was a 300 or 400 person wedding. It was in July. The wedding went till 5 or 6 in the morning, and it was fun. I ended up having an experience that really changed my outlook on weddings. I had a very kind of introspective look into some of the guest interactions, and that just the kind of thing that happened there on site doesn't happen, I think, organically in any kind of other social setting. There was a
Yeah.
moment where the father of the bride had this total breakdown. The crowd, actually, Spain had just won the World Cup and they crowd surfed him, and he had this moment of pure bliss and he was like crying, and it was insane. And I just like took this moment in and like was like, I think I like this. And then I just ended up pursuing weddings after that. So it was a kind of weird roundabout way of getting into it. So
It's funny, Ashley. I've kind of been reminded of this at numerous points. Like you, I really, there, some of my friends look at me, they're like, you're in the wedding industry. That just still trips me out. Like, because I did no planning for our wedding, but something beautiful that hit me at some point, I got into the industry in 2013 was like, this industry, and I can't name another just off the top of my head that also fits this bill, is centered around love, right? Celebrating love. And there is something so magical about the energy and vibe at a wedding. and there's
Yeah.
really nothing else like it. It sounds like that for you, that energy and that vibe, like, really kinda got its hooks into you, like
Kind of rejuvenates every time we go to a
yeah,
wedding. But there
yeah,
is that spark there, and it is really fun to watch like connectivity and you watching people really open up. I mean, the emotional aspect is, it's hard not to get like kind of turned on like into that same realm where you're just like, wow, I would want this for myself, but I'm watching something happen that doesn't happen anywhere else. And people kind of coming together is, I think, really powerful. And so I think that's why we kind of stay in it too and kind of keep coming back.
So speaking to that, Ashley, I mean, that was nearly a decade and a half ago, and you've constantly been improving and reinventing yourself. And like, can you just kind of tell me where does that passion come from such that like I don't want to put ideas or words in your head or mouth here, but like I still feel that you're like your heart's really in this thing. Like where's that fuel coming from over the last decade and a half that sustained that?
I think that we get to meet so many interesting people. Like the kind of cool thing about weddings too is it's not one genre of people. Like you're not working like in a normal workforce where you're like, oh, I know I'm going into like a room full of accountants. It's like every client is different. And then the people that like, are in that community with them are also very different. And so it is actually really fun. We have clients that we have connected with so hard that we are best friends with them still. We've done other things for these same clients down the road, like baby showers or second weddings. I have a family where I'm doing their fifth kid's wedding right now, and we feel so like cemented in with them. We love them so much. But we do get this, every event is different too. And like we're never doing, even though the project scope might be similar every time, it's a wedding. So you know that, two people are getting married and there's other events that follow, but every one is so uniquely different. So it's something that kind of keeps us on our toes. But there are exciting elements to each one. And I know my team is growing and changing too. But they get really excited by these things as well. And we just love people. Like we're in the business of people, we're a service, and getting to know people and understanding them and working for them and, bringing these things together is what really drives us, I think.
That's really cool, Ashley. Yeah, I love doing these interviews, and it's easy to kind of get just mired down in the day-to-day grind or work, and obviously what you do is not easy, not for the faint of heart, but like I just have these moments where I pop up and I'm like, I just love this industry. Like the people that I've met are so cool. It's just a really special thing. So, as we talked a little bit in the pre-interview, what I see myself as doing on these interviews, Ashley, is kind of being a conduit of information, right? Like you have years of experience. We talked in the pre-interview about the School of Hard Knocks. Lord knows I've been there. You've learned a lot, and what I want to do is like kind of in the limited time we have, just kind of elevate some of these lessons that you've learned along the way. So we were talking about the factors that are responsible for your success, and you told me about the idea of focusing on the experience, being a trendsetter. Like, can you tell me about the role that that's played in the development of your business, like focusing on the experience and being a trendsetter?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's a lot of, again, this is multifaceted in a lot of ways, but we love our clients. We kind of spoke a little bit about how we let them kind of lead. I think one of our strong suits is really letting their personalities and their communities or whoever it is really shine in our events. Like we really, I don't know, we've done a lot of things. We have a couple of weddings that really come to mind where I'm like, wow, like nobody had really done this thing before. And then it becomes a little bit of a trend afterward.
Yeah, so I'm thinking like, I think actually a lot of people today, they, the tendency is to kind of look and want to copy other people, It almost feels safe, So you're doing these innovative things. You're coming up with fresh ideas, but is that a little scary for you sometimes? Or, and do you feel like a little fear around trying something new and you just push through and do it anyway? I'm just kind of thinking because I think a lot of people just kind of want to stay in this safer space, and it's almost like easier to look at what other people are doing, like like what is it that like kind of lets you kind of try these new things without being kind of stuck in a box of fear?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's necessarily like fear-based, but we do have people who stay very reserved. And so what we want to do is push boundaries with our clients a lot. And so we do encourage them. Like if there's something that's coming up or there's an idea that like maybe we're all mulling on and we're like, oh, this would be so fun to do. And then they're kind of like, oh, I don't know. It feels like my parents wouldn't like it, or it feels like it
Right.
feels just like too much, like we shouldn't do it. We'll kind of always encourage them to do it because I think that like people go to weddings, right, all of the time. Everybody goes to weddings, sometimes multiple weddings a year. We see the same, the course of action. So it's like, a ceremony, this cocktail hour or whatever. And so we're like, why not make it a little bit more entertaining, a little bit more fun, push boundaries a little bit. And so we have done that with a few clients and it always works out really well. I've never had somebody say like, oh, we regret that. They're
Right.
always like overjoyed with, actually the feedback is generally like, I can't believe that happened. We're so happy and I'm so glad you made us do it. So I think that like go for it. Like it's also a time to have fun. Like it is your wedding, but if there's something that like can be infused into it too, that's a little bit different, I think that it's going to like build momentum. It's going to like create synergy amongst your guests. Like this is usually kind of falling into like a production piece. Like this is like an entertainment piece or things like that. Like we had a bride and groom one year who we had a brass band wear all white and they played only Beyonce songs and we had them all like lead and parade after dinner to get them up out of their dinner seats. They like paraded through all of the dinner tables and then like actually hopped on individual shuttles to take them to the dance party. And so that was like just kind of a fun thing. I know that there was a little bit of like, this will be cool, but will it work kind of a thing. And
Right.
pieces always do work, like they just do. And they're fun.
Where
So,
do you get your inspiration for your ideas, Ashley? I'm sure that's probably a very open-ended. It comes from a lot of, but like, I hear an idea like that. I'm like, are you reading your client and then kind of drawing inspiration from that? Are you
yeah.
reading other magazines and drawing on your other background, like in design? And like, where are these ideas and inspiration coming from?
Absolutely. So we also come from a little bit of a background where we've done a little bit of like festival production and some other things too. So I
Right.
think that like we don't necessarily follow trends in the wedding industry specifically. Like we're not pulling things off of Pinterest that we've seen a million times. We really look at the environment and that we're working with and then kind of the flow of the event. So if there are opportunities to again sub in little moments that again create a little bit more emphasis on connecting people or creating excitement or building momentum, like we always try to infuse those things in. um, and sometimes this comes from the client too. A lot of our clients have their own ideas or wishes, and then we just really build it out for them, where we kind of like start with a tidbit of information, and then we're like, oh, I saw something similar, and it would be really fun to like, I don't know, like make this like snowball and make this thing bigger than it could be. So we do that a lot, but we do pull. I work I love interior design a little bit too. So sometimes we're thinking of things as more of like a design standpoint as well. And again, not just like weddings. I think a lot of people are like slapping tables down and slapping chairs in a field or in a barn or whatever it is. And it feels a little lackluster sometimes. So we really want to create a whole environment and we work with like a whole scenario and like how do we make all of these things connect and feel very cohesive. And so whether that's entertainment or a design element or like a fun, you know, activity that guests are doing, we kind of sub in a lot of these things all of the time.
That's really cool, Ashley. I think, if I'm putting myself in the shoes of somebody listening right now, I'm sure there are some people whose inspiration buttons are being tapped right now, and they're thinking, wait, I can kind of step out. I have a few ideas, or, I've kind of been doing things in a safe, kind of like everybody else way, but I have an urge to maybe try something more adventurous. What would you say to somebody who might be thinking along those lines, like having those urges to be more adventurous? Like, what would you say to them to help them kind of cultivate that or lean into that sort of urge that they're feeling?
Do it, like by by all means, like do it if
Yeah.
you have the time in your little timeline or like if the energy to like facilitate some of these things. Like I think
Yeah.
that they're all impactful always. I think that the guests are always enchanted as well, and so I think that again, as like from a guest experience sign, because we are experienced designers, like people have an idea of what the expectation is going to be going into a wedding. So if you can change it up a little bit and make it exciting for them, it always works. So I would just do it.
That's cool. So I guess, it's funny. I think a lot of people just have this conception that like, oh, I can't do that. Like I can only do logistics. And, that's great. If you can team up with somebody that has like that natural gene for design, that's great. But even if you don't, I don't know, it almost seems like all of us might have this dormant sort of creativity that we're not tapping into. Do you think that your creativity is just innate? Is it something that you work on cultivating like intentionally? Or is it just like, no, this is just natural? It's like, this is my height, this is my hair color, and this is who I am. Like, how do you kind of feel about that nature
Yeah,
versus nurture for creativity?
it definitely is something that is just, I mean, inherently, I guess, within my personality. I do get excited by funny, like quirky little things all of the time. I think that I get easily excited by things, and that maybe genuinely sparks a lot of things as well. I can pull creativity and inspiration from seeing something, but my brain typically works in more of like this engineering way where like I'll see something small or like I don't know, like a little design element somewhere, and I'll have to know how that thing is made. I'll have to figure it out and I'll have to like re-engineer it and like make that thing work in our event somehow. And so that's something that not a lot of other people do, but I know my team constantly is like, how did you just figure that thing out? Like you looked at something for 2 seconds and figured out the mechanics of it and have like figured out how to reconfigure it into something that would work for our events.
Yeah.
So it's something that I can also pull creativity, I think, sometimes from the most bizarre things that are literally not related to weddings or events. I will literally see something on the side of the street and be like, oh, light bulb, like that thing would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't think they'll
That
ever.
is nature. That's like you have a thing like inside you. It's like people say when, like I just watched this documentary about like Jimi Hendrix, and it's like the minute he got his first guitar, his fingers were glued to it. Bobby Fischer like played chess so much that his mom was like, "Is there something wrong with my little boy?" Like there's something inside you in here that like is being tapped into and that lights up around
Mhm.
these. So that is really I really like I love these interviews because the picture just starts to like become clearer and clearer that like this creativity that you're talking about that you're putting into these events is influencing the experience, and then that's leading to the word of mouth referrals and all of that. Another point that you mentioned in our pre-interview when I was just kind of decoding your success, you talked about the role that empathy has played for you in your career and in the building of your business. Can you unpack that a little bit more? Talk to me about like what empathy is and why it's been important for you.
Yeah, definitely. I think empathy is a huge characteristic of mine. It's now been ingrained into my team as well. I think that a lot of our clients come from, again, like often it's two people who are creating a union, right? And they're coming from two very different backgrounds. A lot of times this means different financial constraints or backgrounds just altogether, or it could be logistics. You know, we have people that are coming from the Philippines and Mexico getting married and they're trying to find a location, or there's sometimes really hard elements that come together to make a great wedding or to make a really enjoyable experience for other people. So having empathy and really being able to like understand and really feel for these people of what is going to work, but understanding how to like pull these elements together, I think has really given us a strong a handle on how to produce our events and stuff. We do a lot of destination events as well, and a lot of times that is because there's a history or a background too in another location, and so it's like you may have a family from the Midwest who's marrying somebody again from Brazil or something, and it's like how do you get these two groups of people that might not necessarily mesh come together and have an experience that is really pleasant too? Because sometimes obviously we know like anything that can go wrong will go wrong, but there's also not everybody has again the same expectation going into an event. So I don't know, empathizing on all fronts too has been really powerful for us. And for me in particular too, a lot of clients are also coming to us at different age groups. So we've had people that
Mhm.
it's their first wedding. We've had people it's their second wedding. We've had people that who, have had just different life paths. And it's like being able to understand all of these different personalities and these different life paths and how they're going to like ultimately come together has helped create a really strong roadmap for how to kind of move forward with a lot of things. And understanding people's personalities too. Just because one scenario works really well for one set of clients does not mean that same scenario is going to work really well for the next set of clients. So you kind of really have to get to know the people that you're working with as well. Understand them, understand what makes them tick, understand what makes them excited, understand what turns them off.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think that kind of negative, you know, like is always constructive for anything that we're doing. Um, but putting all those pieces together is really not, it's not a clear puzzle by any means. It's definitely a big puzzle. And we've worked really hard to kind of get to a place where we understand everybody.
It's weird, Ashley, because on its face, the two things that you talked about would almost kind of seem to like be in tension, like to like competing sort of factors. Like on the one hand, it's like you're bringing this creativity and your vision and design instincts and ideas to the table, and on the other hand, you're listening to like the minds and hearts, tapping into the minds and hearts of the people you're serving. How do you kind of thread that needle between the two, right? Because you have your ideas and then you have what you're dialing into that are like their latent desires. Like, how do you kind of mix those together to get like that perfect concoction of an experience, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, there's factors that also influence this too. I think having a lot of patience and learning to listen. I think that instead of really forcing any ideas on people, we're very like, we think this would work. We'd love to present you with this idea. Here's something that could be really exciting. I don't always just come out with it right away. Sometimes we're kind of hanging on to these like little ideas or nuggets that we think will be good and we'll kind of sub them in. We often work with our clients for years, so we have plenty of time to do this. But we're listening to them and having a lot of patience and letting them be heard too, because they often want to, they have an idea. I think even taking it back a step too, one of the biggest things we've learned with clients is we can't see into people's mind's eye, and not
Mhm.
everybody can clearly articulate what they're trying to say. A lot of people are coming to this doing this type of event for their first time. They've never planned anything, let alone
Mhm.
with somebody else, let alone have been faced with making this many decisions or having this many choices about things or knowing where to start in particular. So we kind of sit back from that very front, first initial step where we're listening to all of the like thoughts and ideas that are coming out of them, and then some of the constraints. Sometimes there's financial constraints with things, or there's like logistical or environmental constraints, and then we kind of, yeah, have a lot of patience and wait until the right moment to be like, okay, this thing is going to work. It's going to like,
Yeah.
appease all of these other outside factors, and it'll all kind of come together seamlessly. We do have to, kill a lot of ideas too. There's a lot of ideas that come up that are going to be so exciting, but may not work because of weather or getting things on an airplane or what's available in the location and those types of things too. So, yeah.
That's really interesting. It's funny as you were talking, Ashley. First of all, I just want to like underscore what I think is a very important word that you said, which is listening. I think that is an art that we can, it's very easy to just kind of get caught up in what we want to say in our ideas. But what I'm hearing as I kind of take in what you're saying is your listening is kind of step one, dialing into the heart's, minds, needs, and constraints of the client that you're serving. This is kind of a weird parallel, but you're talking to a tech entrepreneur. So this is where my brain's going. It's a really interesting parallel between like the idea of tech innovation because a lot of people think this is a huge misconception, I think, about the way that successful tech companies are created. A lot of people think you just have this creative burst of inspiration and you build this product. Actually, what you do is first you listen to a population of people who have a need. In my case, it was
Yes.
listening to wedding planners. And then once you have a deep understanding, like an empathetic understanding for the people that you intend to serve, then you exercise your creativity and innovation to come up with a product idea. And then you go back to them and you say, this is what I'm thinking. Does this work? And invariably they're like, this could be better. And it's kind of this like, beautiful little cosmic dance, and I'm
Yeah.
again, I just kind of hear a sort of similar. Do you ever find, Ashley, that like you have an idea and you want to kind of like pitch it in a way so it sells, and you're worried that maybe the client's going to bat it down, but you're like, I can see this, it's awesome. Like, does that ever happen?
Oh, all the time. Absolutely. It kind of happens a lot in the fashion world, like fashion with us.
Yeah,
Like a lot of people
yeah,
want to do multiple outfit changes and then they get like, oh, it's too much, it's too risky. But yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of design factors too that we're like, this thing would be amazing. Trust us, it'll be so cool. But people can't,
yeah,
a lot of people we've worked with don't, they haven't done these things, but they also, everybody, like some people are visual and some people are not. And some people can't envision what something would look like in a certain
yeah,
setting. So
yeah.
yeah, we're always, I had to like actually learn to model in 3D to fully be able to pull this stuff through. So I like spent during the pandemic, I spent a lot of time like fully learning how to model and do like renderings of things for people actually because just doing normal 2D floor plans wasn't enough.
What do you use to do your 3D floor planning? That's a really interesting point.
um, yeah, SketchUp.
Scat, yeah, cool, very cool. Yeah, no, I could see
SketchUp,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's really that's another sort of ingredient of success, right? Is like never reaching a point where you're complacent and saying, I have all the skills I need. I love that, I remember talking to some planners and it's like the natural tendency was to just be like, the world's ending, I'm bummed out, I'm over it, I'm done with this industry because of the pandemic. But then you have people like you that are like, you know what, this is a good time to build a new skill. Like that's a really cool sort of way to go with it.
Yeah.
We talked, Ashley,
Well, an interesting
about.
kind of,
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
oh, I
Jump
was
in.
going to say an interesting point was going through the recession in 2008. What I kind of really learned was, and we'll talk about the luxury market, I think, in a little bit,
Yeah,
but like,
yeah,
people who have generational wealth or who have money or old money, like those people still throw personal events. They're still having weddings. They're still doing things through times like this. Like we're kind of, I know the recession
yeah,
coming up is like a
yeah,
big topic. And I think a lot of planners are feeling that too. But maybe like, going through a pandemic recently, I didn't have any fear that our industry would dissipate or go away. I was
yeah.
like,
I didn't
this thing
either.
is going to come back. We're going
It
to have
is.
to be ready.
Yeah. No, that's a really cool perspective. And, it's easy to say that now, right? Because everybody, like, of course it was, but like, to really have that belief then, like, because it was challenging. I mean, there were people like, the world is ending. Like, and it kind of seemed like, I remember, this is just such a random anecdote, but I'm here in New York City. I remember getting off the train in, like, it was like Union Square, and it was like, I thought I was in the movie I Am Legend. I was literally the only person on the platform. There may have been one other person in the station on the other side. I can't remember why I had to be out in the city, but like, in moments like that, you're kind of like, wait a minute. But I totally shared your belief. I was like, we're not done celebrating love. Like weddings will be back at some point. Um,
Oh, yeah.
the um, the luxury market. So you mentioned this. This is a really, I think, meaty topic, Ashley, because I know so many planners across the country, around the world, like they reach a point where they're kind of looking for like next steps. And a lot of them very candidly want to do what you've done, which is to kind of iterate your way, navigate your way into the luxury market. Let me just kind of start with a high level, open ended sort of question of how did you do that? Like, how did you get into the luxury? Let's just kind of start with the high level, how you got into the luxury market.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I wanted to break into for years. And I think that in the beginning, I didn't necessarily have the toolkit to do that. I
Mhm.
definitely was starting to get, when we were starting to get inquiries for bigger budgets and things like that, I would get a little bit upset if we didn't get hired. And then I'd see another planner get hired for the same job. And I'd be like, what do they have that I don't have? I think a big thing was I changed my mindset. I changed my mindset and started acting more like those people, necessarily not the planners, but like the clients. So a lot of
Mm.
our clients, what we see now, are staying at five-star resorts all of the time. They're reliant on a lot of kind of satellite help things, or they're not like blinking their eye at small expenses and things like that. And where I
Mm.
was coming from working with smaller budgets, like every penny was counted and everything was such a big deal. And like I had to watch
Wow.
every single fork at every event because, like if something was lost, it would cost a lot of money after the event. And not to say that we don't still do that. We very much implement and watch everything that happens on site, but people with more money and like in the luxury market like have more of a mindset of abundance and like they're not really blinking their eye at what things cost. And I had to kind of change my mindset to kind of parallel
Mm.
that too. What I had found I
So
was doing a lot
gosh.
was being like,
Yeah.
oh, this vendor quoted me XYZ for this thing and it feels so expensive, but my clients would sense my fear about maybe
Ah.
sharing that quote with them. And so I had to just change my mind and literally be like, yep, this is what this thing costs and it's worth it. And then people are
Cool.
like, okay, if you think so, we trust you. So there was a bit of like learning how to train myself in that regard. But once I started doing that, and I knew that all of these things I wanted to do or present to clients were always worth it. But if I was presenting it in a way of like, I'm scared they're not going to like it because it's too expensive, that was shooting myself in the foot a little bit. So
And how,
just,
Ashley?
yeah,
This is
changing our mindset a
so
lot.
interesting to me. This is so fascinating to me. Like this notion of mindset, right? Like, yeah, there's the toolkit, and I want to circle back to that too, but like, why was it shooting yourself in the foot if you went back and you had that scarcity kind of vibe or mindset or energy around like a price and you talked to your client, like what perception did it trigger that was like detrimental to you? Does that make sense?
I think so much around budgeting. The biggest job we do is budget for our clients all of the time. And so the way that we budget is we have like categories for things and a budget is predetermined. And we always try to stay within these categories of what we've, from the very early stage that we're working with our clients. And so sometimes let's say it's a small, like a dance floor or something like that. And we're budgeting and we think a dance floor is going to cost, let's say $8,000 or something, but then we get a quote back that's higher than that. I would come from this place of being like, oh God, it's more than we budgeted. They're going to be upset,
Right,
you
right.
know, but like their design may have changed. And what I had to realize was like what the client is asking for and how I would approach this now that I didn't was like, I budgeted this thing at a base level thing when we talk about so like this is like what a baseline dance floor would be. But if you're asking for custom graphics or a bigger dance floor or you're asking for more things on it, like obviously that quote's going to go up. So we now kind of approach things and we're very like transparent with everything that we do, but we're like, yeah, of course it's this much because it's XYZ and it's worth it. We
Yeah,
think you should spend the money if this is what you really want versus, being just more scared that it was like over
yeah,
budget or not where we anticipated it being initially. I think a lot of things too with clients that have bigger budgets or more in the luxury market will always agree that like these things are worth it and they want these things kind of regardless. So as long as we're like tracking the little changes in the budget or where it
right.
lands, they're approving it constantly, then that makes a big difference versus me being like, oh, we can't afford it. We shouldn't do it.
So interesting, Ashley. It's almost like if you go back to them with that energy and presentation and vibe, they're kind of, I mean, you correct me if this isn't right, but it's almost like they're going to be like, wait, is she the right person to be handling this? Because like she's almost like a little unconfident or uncomfortable. We just want the thing that's best, but she seems a little unsure. Is that kind of the thing that starts happening in their minds?
Oh,
And
absolutely. And I think confidence, like what you just touched on, is a huge point as well. Like maybe I was feeling like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble or they're not going to be happy because it's more than we thought it would be. And then becoming, yeah, changing my confidence level too and approaching these
wow.
topics has made a huge change in things.
And, the interaction that we're talking about there, this notion of like, okay, we budgeted, 8 grand and now it's more. That's an interaction that happens after you've gotten the person as your client. So at that point, you're already
Hmm.
getting the clientele. I'm almost thinking like a step earlier because there was a phase where you were trying to kind of get into the luxury market and you weren't landing the clientele. Like, what changed in that pre booking stage? How does mindset tie into that part of the experience? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we started leading a little bit more with our personality forward too. Like we're very approachable, we're very personable. I think that a lot of times we offer an initial consultation when people reach out to us where I always hop on the phone with them. And that's kind of our window of opportunity, right? Where we know what we're charging, people are reaching out, but like at the same time, um, we're able to like engage with people and people get to talk with us. And I would say I'm very personable, but also very patient and kind of have a soothing attitude with a lot of things. I think that's something else that people really enjoy about us is I'm not an A-type personality, but I'm very confident in what I'm doing. And I'm very like all of our touch points are there. We we're just kind of regular people and we love what we do. And I think that leading with that too, that has changed it too, where I'm not trying to book the business. Like in the beginning, when you're a newer planner, you're kind of trying to book anything that you can. And now
Yeah.
we say no a lot as well. So we're really gauging when we do this like initial concept call with people or consultation call, we're getting to know them too, but we're also simultaneously interviewing them to see if they're a good personality fit. We know now what we're getting into and we know what the engagement is. We work with our clients anywhere from 12 to 18 months. And so that's a huge thing too. And I think that separates the luxury market a bit apart from the other parts of the market is when you're just booking any work or any client at any budget or anything, like they're not all going to be a good fit for you and they might not be a great success in the end. So that I think has changed our business a bit too, is leading with our personality but getting to know people, but also kind of interviewing them moving into it.
And all of this ties back to like like there's almost this primal thing that like I feel like we communicate on so many different levels in every interaction we have. There's almost like this overall energy that people can see and read. And it's not just the words that I'm saying. And it's not even necessarily just the body language. It's like the total package. And that word confidence keeps coming to mind for me, Ashley. Like, if you show up, and I want you please to correct any of this if it's not actually true to your experience,
Yeah.
but like, it's almost like when I first launched Timeline Genius, our wedding day timeline software, right? Like it was almost like, will you please use this software? Like it just came out of beta versus now I'm like, I have seen countless planners over the last 10 years get onto this. I know this is going to change your life. I'm not saying this just to get your business. Like, it's almost like people can feel that. And not that you're coming from a pompous, arrogant place, but just in a very
Yep.
genuine, like, I'm here to help you. And if this isn't right for you, you can go. Oprah talks about that. I remember hearing Oprah talk about it's so counterintuitive, but I heard it in what you just said too. It's like letting go of that like obsessive attachment to like I got to get this business in a weird way that
Yeah.
pushes it away from you, you know? These are all these intangible
Yeah.
things. I don't know. Does that all that kind of resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would get like, in past years, like I would get upset again if I didn't book every client or if somebody didn't, I took it personally too. I'd be like, oh, they didn't want to book us. But then at some point I had a switch. I was like, you know what? Like again, I've had so many experiences over the years. We've done probably 200 weddings, if not more. And I mean, I can just tell you, like a lot of personalities too. We're in the business of people, and like the personalities have to be a fit. And so I think that there's something that people also gather in that initial phase when we're chatting and just interviewing each other. And that's, is this a good fit personality wise? But like, yeah, again, we don't need all of the business. We just need the right business. And so kind of filtering through that has made a huge change.
I love that. And just kind of meeting your clients at this luxury level where they are in terms of, you said the word abundance. That just jumps out in my mind, right? Like these are people who have a different, I'm assuming, orientation and relationship with money. They're not thinking about things in that nickel and dime sort of way. And you want to kind of match that wavelength, right? Otherwise, it's not going to fit. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
As a wedding planner, you know how important it is to create detailed wedding day timelines for your events. But creating your timelines can be a tedious and time-consuming job. Until now. Because Timeline Genius lets you create beautiful, detailed wedding day timelines with ease. And it keeps everything you need on the wedding day in one central place. Here's how it works. First, Timeline Genius saves all your clients, vendors, and venues in your Rolodex, so you don't lose time looking for their information. And when you're ready to create a new timeline, you simply enter the key information for your wedding. Click a button, and voila! Timeline Genius magically gives you a customized timeline for your event, where all the details are laid out and the times are calculated for you. From there, you can easily edit your timeline by adding or deleting items, inserting images, changing font styles, and customizing everything to your liking. You can also instantly shift the times for as many items as you want. And when it comes to your clients and vendors, Timeline Genius lets you give them the highest level of service. You can send them tailored timelines, showing only the items they're involved in. And you can collaborate by inviting them to a mobile-friendly, web-based version of the timeline. You can even set text message reminders to automatically go out on the wedding day. And once you've completed your perfect timeline, you can download it or email it out as a beautifully styled PDF. And that's Timeline Genius, a smart software that will help take your wedding planning to the next level. Start your free trial today.
So, Ashley, to get just a little bit more concrete here, we talked about rebranding, okay? Because this mindset is hugely important. If you don't have the right mindset, you're not going to get there, but kind of translating that into the brand and the image and the messaging and positioning that you're broadcasting out into the market, you have gone through some rebranding efforts. Talk to me a little bit about what prompted that. And talk to me, as best you can tell, what's the right way to do rebranding and maybe the wrong way to do it based on your experience.
Yeah. I mean, having as many years in the industry as I have now, I actually started with a very different name. I don't even want to say it. But back then, 14 years ago, I had one of those cutesy wedding planning names. I thought it was great. I thought it was doing me a service. It wasn't. I had that name for probably 5 years, I would say. And then I went through in 2017, I rebranded. And I think that changed my business entirely, keeping the name kind of concise. And also really, my name, Ashley Smith, is a very basic name. So that's kind of a hard one I've found to kind of share or translate any kind of tone or message, because it's also, there's a lot of other Ashley Smiths in different realms. There's a supermodel, there's other things, but kind of keeping the business also, it has gained a following, and it does have its own, I think that people recognize the name all of the time when they hear it. I think that also just trying to find a tone or find something that set my name apart, because so many other wedding planners also are their names now. It's a transition that we've seen in the last 8 years or so. A lot of times everybody had cute names. Everybody was, I can't even think of any, but cutesy names. But then we started seeing all the wedding planners rebrand to their own name, regardless if they were an individual planner or if they had a team. And I think that actually was really a critical moment and kind of a pivotal part in my business. There was something singular about just being Ashley Smith Events, and people recognized that. Since then I had kind of I had simple branding. I've always been kind of minimal in the sense of that. I always want our images to speak for themselves and our work to speak for themselves. I didn't want the brand itself to be this cutesy thing with a lot of colors and swashes or, little graphics or anything like that. And I had a website for the past probably 7 years that was very minimal and simple, and it was more portfolio based. But even in that, it was something that I had designed myself on Squarespace or something like that, and didn't manage it very well. And that was doing me a disservice as well. So in the past 6 months, I've fully rebranded. I hired a graphic designer. Shout out to Nubo. She's great. And she fully designed my website, which actually just launched last week. Branding is still very minimal and simple and clean, but we wanted something that just felt a little more luxury and high end. So we worked really hard to make this something that we can translate into a lot of different mediums too. Our brand goes on our attire when we're on site. It's on the website. We do have a little bit of swag and other things that we use. So it made a big difference, I'd say, but really paying attention to detail and what people pick up and what they're going to interpret the brand as is really important as well. I think a huge thing that I realized was it's cute to have cute branding amongst your peers, but the
Right.
people that are actually looking at your brand a lot are like mothers of the brides.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's magazines and periodicals or, like press and things too. So you really want to make sure you have something that's like seamless and beautiful across, that you're gonna feel happy with as well across all
Yeah.
these different platforms.
Yeah, it's cool. That kind of rounds it out, right? Like you can have all the mindset right and all of that, but if people look at your brand and it's not meeting their expectations and it's not like vibing with your ideal client,
Yeah.
then you're going to be kind of out of luck, right?
Well, you get kind of one shot, right? As like brides and stuff are browsing and looking at 50 different planners, you also want to stand out, but it's about you want to stand out and be memorable, I guess, in the way like you want to evoke emotion. You want something to be there that people like remember you. They're going to come back and be like, "Oh, I saw this. This website was the one I liked." And so that was something we spent a lot of time. I also didn't want to look like every other wedding planner on the website, like, just a gallery right up front and, whatever. So we did a little bit more of like a fashion layout on the front page, and it's kind of fun, a little more editorial.
Do you think, Ashley, that if there are, say planners listening to us right now that are not currently in the luxury market, but they want to get into the luxury market, do they almost out of necessity need to do a rebrand, kind of start with a clean slate and then go into this market? Or do you think that it's possible to kind of keep that current brand and just change the focus of like the social media images that you're publishing? Maybe even to change the copy, like is that rebrand necessary to make that leap upstream in the market?
Well, images are your currency, when it comes to this industry, I think too, because that's the only thing you have to show people what you do. So your images
Hmm.
have to be really strong and clean and good.
Hmm.
It's hard because you're going to work with a lot of different photographers, but setting yourself apart is going to mean picking photographers too, where all of the work feels kind of seamless across all your projects. So really kind of honing in on what your style is with photography as well, not just like your wedding designs. If you have a
Right.
website, or something with a bunch of galleries and you have a photographer who has a lot of like sepia toned photos, and then you have somebody who's shooting film, and then you have somebody who's shooting,
Right.
something where it's like high contrast in colors, like those don't look great across your whole site. So kind of really honing in too on who you're lining yourself up with in the industry, especially photographers, is going to be really important. Um, and then I would say that, like, to break more into the luxury market, it's more about your peers as well.
Right.
So, like, are you working with vendors that are going to elevate your brand? Are you really positioning yourself in a way, like, are you working at the venues where these luxury people want to be at? So it's
Right.
kind of like shoulder rubbing too. Like you do want to, spend time getting to know the high end venues and the photographers that work at these places as well.
Really interesting stuff, Ashley. I always watch the time fly here, and there's definitely a related but still tangential topic that I want to touch on while I have you, and it's the topic of destination weddings, right? You're doing these incredible like events, the Caribbean, Mexico, Europe, like talk to me just high level. What's it like? Because I think a lot of, like that's the dream, right? Is like I'm planning this like exotic, like great 4-day wedding extravaganza in the Caribbean. Like you're doing this. Like what's it like? The good, bad, and in between. Like tell me what it's like doing these destinations.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a different ball game. Like I know I kind of started doing destinations, so maybe my first experience doing that wedding in Spain was a little bit different. I think I've always had a singular sense of adventure as well. And so being able to work in any climate or like any kind of different, atmosphere, like whether it be on the beach or on a mountain, like you kind of have to be ready for all of the different attributes that come with each of these locations. We've worked all over, we've been very lucky and we love our clients, and our clients also are these kind of adventurous personalities and love, you know, going to locations. Like we just did a birthday party in Costa Rica. We actually did a really big 40th birthday party last year in Mexico that was super fun. But we've worked, at Denton, Colorado, we've worked in a lot of different locations, Ireland, Scotland, all kinds of things. And I think, again, meeting the client's needs and understanding each location first is the very first pivotal step. Like if you're even recommending a location to a client and you don't understand their personalities, you're doing nobody a service. So kind of understanding the location first and what could kind of happen there, or some of the climate factors and things like that. Like if you're recommending a wedding to somebody in the Caribbean and it's going to be on a remote island where you have to boat everybody in on small boats, and you have a ton of people who are going to get seasick, or people who are not going to be okay with the distance. Like that's something that you want to suss out before you even recommend these locations to people. With the beach things, a lot of people, what we experience too is like, being in the sun, bugs, humidity. These are all like factors we have no control over. And if you don't have the right personalities going to these locations, like, again, you're not doing anybody a service. So really understanding that first and foremost, and then picking like the locations that are good fit for your clients. We have been doing a lot more in Europe in the last 2 years, particularly since the pandemic, because the euro is weaker. And a lot of people are, really had that like, we want to just travel once the pandemic was over. So we've seen a lot more, like a big uptick in Europe, which has been really, really fun. But, that has its own set of other, things to think about when you go into doing that. Like the time change can be really challenging for people if you're 8 or 9 hours ahead. You're different groups coming from different locations. A couple of things that we think about doing a lot is we actually vet or try to at least pay attention to things that could affect the experience that the guests have. So like we've been avoiding flying Air France at all if possible, because Air France is on strike all of the time and luggage is never delivered and people don't make their flights or they're canceled. And that can be a really disastrous experience for guests if they're not aware of this. So there's kind of like this bigger awareness that you have to have before you even start doing destinations. You obviously want to like the culture, checking in with cultures and like, is this appropriate for your guests? Kind of mentioned previously, we do a lot of same-sex weddings too, which, Europe has been really fantastic with that. But there are, we just want to like fact check and make sure that everybody's going to be, well received in a lot of locations as well before we recommend anything to people.
Now, are you typically actually recommending the destination, or in an equal percentage of cases, just kind of following the couple's lead because they have a connection to that destination? Like, how does that usually shake out?
Most of the time it's us recommending. So our clients will usually be like, Europe, we want to go to Europe. And that's all the direction we get.
Wow.
Specifically, they might be like Italy, but like they're just like, tell us what they're like. They'll be like, we want to be near a body of water. We want to go till 4 a.m. We want a full bar, and we maybe want to sleep 60 people on site. And they're like, what checks all our boxes? So then our job is really to go and we have a huge list of, vendors and well, not vendors, but like venues that we work with, but we really kind of act like a travel agent in that regard as well. So we are often recommending, we've done so much research and, have so many experiences with all the different locations already. Mexico in particular is always a big one where people are like, we want Mexico. And then we get into like, a certain venue might be 3 to 4 hours from a major airport. And is that going to be a problem for your guests? So we kind of deal with all of those logistics and factors before getting into it. But typically, to answer your question, we are recommending the actual locations. They'll have a general sense, and then we take it from there.
So I want to start the Mission Impossible theme music because I'm going to, ask you for something that can't actually be done. But if we could kind of put a bow on top of this, okay? I feel like we've covered so much ground. We've talked about mindset. We've talked about engineering the experience and empathy. We've talked about breaking into luxury and destinations. If we were to sort of take a step back, 10,000-foot view here, Ashley, and you could just kind of give people some advice, like, because again, I know not everybody, because everybody has their own desires, values, and dreams, but I guarantee you somebody listening to us right now has had the thought, that's what I want to be doing. Like, I want to be doing luxury events. I want to be traveling the world. And, we're not sugarcoating and saying it's easy, like everything has its challenges. But what would you sort of say to anybody who right now is kind of not doing luxury, not doing destination, just high level sort of advice about like, okay, this is what you should generally be doing if you want to try to get to or swim to where, you currently are.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the best, little tidbits of advice somebody ever said to me, and that really, really like resonated with me, was they said, you cannot grow and stay the same. And that really resonated, where
Mm,
I was like, I wanted to grow, but I wasn't making any changes.
mm,
I wasn't reaching out to, venues I wanted to work at, or I wasn't aligning myself, many years ago in some of those regards. And then I heard that quote and I was like, oh my God, that
mm,
that
mm.
is what I have to do. I have to change. So I started making, all of the changes I think necessary. But I also, another thing is I had to remove my own personal kind of position on some things and realize that like none of this stuff, like I would never say somebody else's wedding is about me, but like I'm again doing a service. So like nothing is about me. I need to make these people happy, and I need to do whatever needs to be done to make their whole experience so much better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was a big, I think, pivotal thing too, was yeah, putting everything else first in that regard.
I love that, Ashley. So there's one more question I have for you, and this is a question that I ask of every guest. And actually, we may have already covered this, but if not, I'll let you kind of, speak to it. If you, drawing from all of your years of professional experience, personal experience, everything all in, if you could give one piece of just specific advice to everybody listening that would help them as much as you could in building their business, whether they want to go into destination or not, like just the most universal sort of best piece of advice you could give, what would you say to people?
I would say reach out to that planner that you admire, reach out to them and like see if you can work freelance in some of their events or shadow them, or see if they do consulting. I think that if there's somebody that you really, see is doing the thing that you want to do, like you're not an island, like go out and interact with those people, become friends with them. Um, you know, do the olive branch. Just, like people are a lot more, I think, open and welcoming than you think they would be. And obviously we all have a lot of different experiences in getting to where we are. So I think learning as much as you can from other people is really going to be the most powerful tool that you can have.
I love that.
That
That
answers your
is a
question.
great place to leave it, Ashley. And if people want to connect with you, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
Um, I don't really want to give my personal email out, but
Like social
Instagram is
media,
great.
like
Um,
yeah. Hmm.
yeah, yeah, Instagram is great. Just Ashley Smith Events. We reply to all of our messages and everything there, and you can definitely find our work and our website and everything through there.
Very, very cool. Well, Ashley, I just want to say on behalf of our Tom Lungius community and all of our Wedding Industry Insider podcast listeners, thank you so much for coming. And,
Thank
it's one thing
you.
to kind of put in the work and get to the place you've reached, but another thing to kind of open up and to just speak very openly and transparently about the things that have helped you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It was a pleasure to meet you and to speak all things weddings.